In my first term, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. I got a lot done as an MP.
Both AAP and BJP are very keen to rope you in.
But they're not the only ones. Education, environment, health. These are great strengths of Kerala, greater than any other state in India. We need to really double down on them, make sure none of those are undermined. Because I was a huge early booster of the Kerala model. If you've read my book, India from Midnight to the Millennium, I called it the Malayali miracle.
You are one of the few politicians who have something positive to say about development. Everything we have found yourself as a very positive person.
I try to be. There's enough negativism around on the planet,
exactly.
So I don't want to add to it.
Exactly. So what's your vision for the state?
Well, frankly, this is where a bit of the negative comes in, because I was a huge early booster of the Kerala model. If you've read my book, India from Midnight to the Millennium, I called it the Malayali miracle. And I did this comparison with those days' figures of the US and Kerala, pointing out how on so many indicators, Kerala and the US were parallel to each other, except that we at that point were 1/70th of their GDP. And so I said this is a terrific achievement and so on. In the course of that book was published 25 years ago, in the course of these last 25 years, some of the flaws have become apparent. And I think what is now unfortunately rather clear is that a social development success story resting heavily on three main sources of revenue. Let's be very blunt. Gulf remittances, excise from alcohol consumption, and tourism can be very vulnerable. COVID was a shock already, a mega shock, because it knocked out the entire tourism revenue, which is why one of the first things that the government opened up during the lockdown was alcohol, so they could start collecting some excise. The Gulf remittances are always vulnerable to domestic policy shocks in those countries if they suddenly decide to start sending people back, or just saying that they need to do more indigenization. We will have a double whammy. We will lose a major source of funds coming in, and we'll also find a challenge in absorbing the people returning, who could potentially become a burden on the economy. We don't attract industry, and I've tried. Actually, for a year and a half after I left the UN, I was an unofficial brand ambassador for Kerala, simply because I was enthusiastic about the idea. I tried to promote investment in Kerala. I remember when Elamaram Karim was industry minister, he came to New York and I hosted a dinner for him with 25 high net worth potential investors. The problem is, unfortunately, the state's reputation has got to a point that even foreign investors who know the state, Malayalis, Marunadan Malayalis, will not invest. And this has got us to a stage where we need to rapidly invent a new paradigm that will transform the state for the future. We have some obvious strengths. You call me upbeat, I'm upbeat about the fact that we have a great environment, by and large. We have tremendously intelligent, well-educated people. We have an atmosphere in which some kinds of industries can flourish, the obvious ones being hospitality, wellness, healthcare, and also IT. I really think that those who pioneered the IT wave in the state had the right idea, and it's worth interrogating as to why we were not able to take it further forward. Why did we never become Cyberabad? Why did we never become Gurgaon? Why is it that the first technopark in India is in Thiruvananthapuram and it remained a relatively minor player for a very long time? And there are a number of reasons, and I've been trying to interrogate people as to what they look for when they consider investments and why they don't always invest as we would like them to. My gut instinct is that the game is not lost. There are a few things we need to do to make it more attractive. Certainly some of our laws need updating. During the last election, when the Congress put me in charge of their manifesto, I held meetings with the GTech, the representatives of the tech companies, in Trivandrum and Kochi joined by video conference. And I was startled to discover we still have some rather antediluvian restrictions on work hours for women and things like that, which have been a drag on the IT sector's compliance problems. So that's one kind of thing we can certainly improve. We need to invest heavily in broadband connectivity. But we can also show more imagination in certain policies. For example, much more connectivity between the university campuses and the workplace. Many students are hungry for internship opportunities. We have no structured way of either doing it, funneling it, or giving credit for it, so that students as a result don't have the kind of opportunities that we could provide them. We don't also seem to be doing enough to help encourage a change in the mindset of people when it comes to regulations. I've met too many investors in diverse sectors, a chap who came and set up a hotel, a chap who tried to start an industry, somebody else trying to do retail work, who all complained about the incredible obstacles that were placed in their path. And frankly, it's not often just the government. Yes, sometimes bureaucrats, especially rent-seeking bureaucrats or ideologically minded bureaucrats, can be a problem, and I have examples of that also. But sometimes it's often our own public. I mean, we have sort of a lot of ideological fervor. People will file cases at the drop of a hat, PILs, legislation of various sorts, which often tie up an investor in knots, and after a while they say, why is this worth it for us? So when the investor is, say, some Gulf Malayali who has put all his life savings into a business or a factory or something in Kerala, the poor chap has no option. He has to slog it out, and we've had one or two sad cases of people even committing suicide, having lost everything because of this. And then we've had cases of people just being so frustrated and thwarted, but having no choice but to stick it out and struggle through, and have incurred losses rather than profits from their investment. And then you've got the very big guys who just walk away and say, never again Kerala. That's got to change, and we've got to really encourage a climate in which this, I mean, for example, an Investor Protection Act is something that I recommended in our manifesto. An investor protection policy accompanied by a law that gives investors a certain amount of assurance of security for their investment when they come would, I think, go a long way to attracting more money. I was very interested to see the piece in your paper today that I think was the 22,000 crores that were pledged during the last summit organized by the state government, of which I think barely 200 crores have actually come, or 100 crores have barely come, precisely because all these pledges could not be fulfilled because of various of these different kinds of obstacles on the way. So I think we need to change a lot of things, but at the same time I think the potential is great. In the tourism area, we've done a lot, but there's still more untapped potential. With nature tourism, I mean, there's so much else, ecological tourism, a certain amount of adventure tourism. But again, we have to get the cooperation of people. I mean, there's potential, huge amount of potential for things like windsurfing and so on outside, but we have to persuade our coastal communities that this is also in their interest. Because, I mean, there has been some episodes of clashes when these have been attempted. But we should take advantage of some of our blessings. And when communities see that other areas have prospered because they cooperated, the others will also cooperate. So all of this requires a government with a focus on growth. And that growth must be, and I've said this throughout, must be in the interests of people. Development is about people. It is not about GDP numbers and dollar signs only. It's got to be that we have to be able to demonstrate to people that when the state grows and prospers, you prosper too. And if that happens, I think we can really go well. But the advantages we have to really accentuate and not do anything to undermine them, which means education, environment, health. These are great strengths of Kerala, greater than any other state in India. We need to really double down on them, make sure none of those are undermined.
So as you said, you have been only an MP for the last 8 years. Before that,
I've been an MP for the last 13 years.
No. Before that, you were a minister, and prior to that, you had a successful career as an international diplomat and all. Now, by being cutting size to a role of an MP, do you feel some disappointment or a sense of your talent getting wasted? Or if we look beyond, the chances of Congress winning the 2024 election is also remote. So you will.
Well, you don't believe in never give up as a philosophy.
So that is a different issue. But how do you personally appraise your self-appraisal for the last 8 years?
No, I will say that in my first term, I'm very proud of my accomplishments. I got a lot done as an MP because there were a number of things which, and one classic example is that national highway had been blocked for 40 years since the stones were first laid. And I didn't even know about the issue when I first came in 2000. I had no clue. It was not on anyone's agenda. But the locals, when I was there campaigning, came to me with tears in their eyes saying, for God's sake, either get the road built or get our stones removed. Cancel the project, but this limbo for 40 years is killing us. We can't even raise money against our land to get our daughters married. We can't sell or dispose of our property because the government stones are on our land. Please help us. So I said, fine, I'll take this up. And I remember my first meeting with Kamal Nath as National Highway Minister was on this issue. Two more ministers, so 3 total ministers, meetings with various officials of the NHAI, lobbied very hard. Finally, the 3rd minister, Oscar Fernandez, was kind enough to put this into the budget in 2013. And by then, of course, the writing was on the wall for the UPA government. So I had to really make every call I could. And fortunately, and that was one advantage of my other life, is that everyone returns my calls and most people knew who I was and either had read my books or knew of me from the UN or whatever it was. So I got tremendous amount of response from every official I spoke to at every time. And I was able to get things moving, getting various things cleared faster than would normally be possible. And at the end of the day, the first checks were issued in time for Oommen Chandi to hand the checks over and for the purchasing of the first bits of land to take place before the 2014 election. Why that's important is under our rules, the election code of conduct will prevent any further action unless it's already started. A continuing action is permitted. So since land had already been acquired before the election was declared, they were able to continue acquiring it, and so on. The project was in place. And frankly, I also realized that if this hadn't been done, then by the time the checks started being distributed, there'd be a new government and they would claim the credit for it. So at least this way, the credit came where it was due for some of the guy who'd slogged for all these years to get it done. Which is something that, had never been of importance to me in the past. But one thing you learn in politics is that sometimes if you want votes, you have to get the credit for what you've done in order to get the votes. But that really saved my skin in 2014 because not just that project. I'd done a few other things. I'd used my persuasive skills to get a number of express trains stopping in Parashala, which had no stoppage for 27 years, and they were absolutely frustrated. Got a couple of stops in Kozhikode station, was able to bring in money for the mental hospital in Perurkada. Actually, I brought in an even bigger project, but unfortunately that got taken away to Kozhikode. State governments have their own priorities. I was able to clinch the deal on the super specialty hospital in the medical college. So a lot of things that I was able to do.
And even in education, while you were HR minister?
Yes, so as the education minister, I brought the CBSE office here. I also persuaded the PWD minister to put an office here. A number of things I was able to do that basically gave more importance to Thiruvananthapuram. But where, if somebody used to take a bus and pay 50 rupees and take 2 hours to get to Trivandrum every morning to work, and they could now take a train for initially 5 rupees, later 10, and get there in 1 hour, obviously, they were grateful to the MP who delivered that because they knew it came because of my efforts. They hadn't been there before. So they would have voted for me. The people seeing the prospect of major development all the way down the national highway, the lands being sold, the stones being, finally getting the more money than they would have got when the stones were originally laid, they would have been very happy. They voted for me. So I was able to survive the Modi wave and a very nasty election campaign in 2014, thanks to my work. In the second term, I think it was more continuing the implementation of it. So, for example, since the highway was my baby and it was seen that way, I really went out of my way for the next 5 years to go to every junction, every point there was a problem, hold meetings with community representatives, get the NHAI project director, try and make sure that problems were ironed out. Nothing just gets done with a wave of a wand or the signing of a pen. You absolutely, or for that matter, by conducting the famous samarams, you actually have to do the nuts and bolts, gritty work, nitty-gritty to get development moving in our country. So literally there would have been 100, 120 controversial issues of junction problems, people's objections, underpass missing, some traditional road that wasn't done, all sorts of things. going there, paying attention, listening to the grievances, trying to get it worked out. If the NHIA really can't do what they want, finding a via media compromise solution. I did this throughout those 5 years, and that again stood me in good stead when the 2019 elections came around. By then the nasty campaign had spent itself, and so I was able to run on who I really was and not what I was being caricatured as being in 2014, and the result was a very big victory in 2019. And then now we are in a stage where, of course, we are not in power in either the centre or the state. And there's great limitations in how much an MP can deliver. So on that aspect of your question, I will concede that there are frustrations because, you may have good ideas, you may diagnose the problems, you may present, but during the COVID, they even took away my MP funds for 2 years, which is the one thing that I could use. You may remember when COVID started, I was again able to get a number of things done simply because I was able to make calls to people inside and outside this country who could be helpful. And we got
test kits from Pune and all.
Everything. I mean, the test kits from Pune, the first things, the first infrared scanners for the Trivandrum railway station and the airport, all of those I got, and I got some of them donated for free as well, because I had very limited money left in the MP funds, and they cancelled 2 years worth of MP funds on us. So that was another big challenge that we had to go through. But to my mind, those were the things I could do and I can do, but I frankly, I could do things where the central government cooperates. So for example, Sri Thiruvananthapuram Medical Institute needed some extra money for their new building. And fortunately, the minister was receptive and I was able to make the demand, get it done. Whether I can solely take credit, no, because the government will say, we gave the money, indeed it's their money. Similarly, I can say that there have been a couple of issues on which, without the cooperation of the central minister, wouldn't have been done, but it did get done, and that's particularly again relating to some of the overpasses and flyovers we needed to be added to the already approved NHIA project. Because these were over and above, all central government projects have a 10% potential padding for cost overruns, but this was beyond that. And Mr. Gadkari, whom I've managed to get a reasonably good equation with, was very helpful and signed off on these things, and as a result, we have really, I think, a good infrastructure coming up from Trivandrum all the way to the Tamil Nadu border. And it's a change actually in many ways for some, because we have made progress in our sector. This road was initially intended 40 years ago to be from Trivandrum to Kanyakumari. So from Trivandrum to Karur on the Tamil Nadu border, we will be done, probably by the end of this year. But the Karur to Kanyakumari is stuck in all sorts of other problems. Kerala is actually succeeding in a development project better than the more sort of development-oriented, supposedly, state of Tamil Nadu in this particular regard. The way politics is in a democracy, it is something that has offered me a certain kind of moral satisfaction that I would argue is even greater than the moral satisfaction that came from the sense of the UN that you're working for the world and working for humanity. All that's wonderful, but the truth is that you're still a bureaucrat, right?
Does that mean that you will not be contesting in the 2024 election?
No, I didn't say that. All I'm saying is that I am seriously examining all the options that are available to me in the present situation, of which one, again, as we always say very dutifully, depends, of course, on the party, whether the party will give me the ticket to contest this the seat again. But if the party were to so decide, that would be one option. And there are other options, and I will have to weigh all the options in my mind.
What exactly are the other options?
No, I don't want to go into all that now, because frankly, the whole point is that the options are in one's mind. All I can say is that I have not been somebody in my entire working life who has asked for anything, but equally I have never been somebody who has shied away from an opportunity or a challenge to make an impact. That's literally from my childhood. I remember as a child in school having to ask the question, why do you think we all exist on this planet? And I said the only reason must be to make a difference. Otherwise, why bother? And so if you are going to try and make a difference, then seize the opportunities that enable you to do so. And I've never shied away from that. So let me see what the opportunities are, and I will then, in due course, when the time is ripe.
Can I ask a connected question? Like, you know the question and I know the answer, but still, both AAP and BJP are very keen to rope you in.
But they're not the only ones. But the point is that, I have the great inconvenience of having ideological convictions. And those convictions go back way before my entry into politics. My books, I published my first book in 1981, Reasons of State. So for 41 years, I've been laying out a fairly consistent vision of the world, which is, for lack of a better term, a liberal vision. And I am, in that sense, an old-fashioned liberal. I don't go around judging people. I don't go around telling people what they should be. But I do go around trying to work for what I believe is my vision of a better society, a better world, a better policy, a better anything. That's the kind of effort that I'm prepared to make. And I've done this and I've written things when doing so put me at odds with what is now my party. Because, for example, I was very critical of the emergency. I was very critical of many aspects of the state control of the economy, all of which I have written and published, so I'm not going to deny them. In fact, I still remember that when I first contested in 2009, the CPI would place a very prominent lawyer, later a president of the Bar Association. In all these public debates we would have before the channels, he would be sitting in the front row with a copy of the Malayalam edition of India from Midnight to the Millennium. And his first question would be to read out some nasty thing I'd said, about the emergency or whatever. To which my answer was, listen, I stand by my words. I meant everything I wrote, but I'm not fighting the elections of 1977. I'm fighting the elections of 2009. To which he really had no better answer. But he would still come at the next debate and again read some other excerpt. The truth is my track record is there. It's a paper trail. My books are all in print. You can find them. I can't deny anything I've said, and I've stood by everything. My worldview has been what it is. But the truth is that the Congress Party post-91 on the economic front, and throughout, I would say, on other fronts, has been a party that I found congenial, and that's why I'm with them. So a party that doesn't share some of the same ideological premises would probably not be an easy place for me to fit into. Because as you all know, I tend not to bite my tongue very often. Once in a while I'll keep silent, but I will not say anything I don't believe in.
Okay, so can we rule out BJP? I mean, from what you said.
I think that's pretty obvious. And in fact, if I were in the BJP, I would not invite Shashi Tharoor to come and join us.
So, but AAP is still there. That option could be a possibility.
Look, I have respect for many parties because each in their own way has their own good qualities. In Delhi, we are opposed to AAP. I'm not going to sit here giving them an endorsement and then being accused of anti-party activities. But I will say some of the work they've done is good, and the service delivery aspect. We've seen the same with 2020 in Kerala. If you can deliver services to the public effectively, that's not a bad thing. I don't think that we should knock that. When it comes to other parties, and there are other regional parties in the country which may choose to have national aspirations, there are parties which have got broadly the same sort of ideology as the Congress, because they've at some point spun away from the Congress. And you know which parties I'm talking about. So it's difficult to say that ideologically there is an incompatibility, because very many parties in our country share broadly the same orientation as the Congress when it comes to the mixed economy, foreign policy, political democracy, freedom of the press. I mean, you name sort of 10 touchstone issues and there'll be 10 parties that claim to adhere to all of those. So in that sense, the idea of India, so-called, I mean, I've often said, when people say, what gives you or anyone in the Congress the right to talk about the idea of India, my answer is it comes to me from the Constitution. My idea of India is the idea of India embedded in the Constitution. That's what it's all about. So in that sense, as far as I'm concerned, I would say to you frankly that all the parties that subscribe to that same ideology would be compatible. So it's not that I'm going around with a litmus test that only applies to one or two places. There may be many possibilities. But right now, I still have hopes that the Congress will turn out to be the right vehicle for advancing this dream of India. But I'm very conscious that you can have all the right ideas and still not be an effective vehicle. Or you can be a very effective vehicle for the wrong ideas. And that's frankly what we're seeing in many ways with the ruling party today in Delhi.
But if you want to come back to Kerala, do you think you will be welcomed here by the Congress state unit, given the equation you have with them?
Who are? I mean, the Congress is all of us, right? All of us who work in the Congress are in the Congress. So it's
state leadership, to be specific, the state Congress leadership.
The current state leadership has an excellent relationship with me. And for that matter, so did the
as
previous.
an MP, but not as a Kerala leader.
Well, I didn't. I have not claimed to be a Kerala leader. I've only claimed to be an MP for Thiruvananthapuram.
So, are you happy to be? I mean, spend the next 5
So
years
far.
of your life, but the next 5 years of your life.
Why do you want to lock me into some narrow straitjacket? We're talking about the last 13 years. I've been MP for Thiruvananthapuram.
We all believe you deserve a better space, not just a
Your
random
political
MP
career
who
seems to be stuck.
Exactly.
You are in Congress, you are an MP. But beyond that, and where is Shashi Tharoor headed? We would like to know.
Let me just say, Shashi Tharoor is not likely to stay in a rut for very long. But let me leave it at that.
Right man in wrong party.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. I hear that too often and for too long. I might have to take it seriously.
You are part of the Bharat Jodo core team. And even after that G23 revolt and all, Rahul Gandhi keeps a very close relationship with you.
I don't know that that's frankly, relationships with individuals have their own ups and downs and they have their own character. I wouldn't go around claiming any particular relationship with anybody. But all I can say is that, or for that matter, any bad relationship with anybody. As I say, I'm a non-judgmental kind of guy. I don't go, have you ever heard me bad-mouthing anybody? I just don't go around playing this game of attacking people. When attacked, I will usually smile and move on. I'm not somebody who frankly believes very much in that kind of politics. That's simply not me. It's not even that kind of personal relationship. Frankly, I've been through a phase in this country's life when a lot of people I knew were saying things behind my back. And I decided that you could either wallow in depression about it, or you could just say that, that says more about who they are and how they think than it says about you. As long as you know who you are, you're anchored in yourself and you have a clean conscience and you know what you're doing and what you've done and not done, let people say what they want to. At the end of the day, we can't constantly be living for others. So do the right thing.
But
And do the thing right.
Another option, the Congress president election are coming. Why can't you be a candidate for the presidency?
Let's wait for the elections to be announced and see what the options are there also. I'm not saying necessarily that I would necessarily be a candidate, but I would say that I hope there'll be if, as seems more and more likely, the sort of heir apparent chooses not to be a contestant, then others will come forward and we'll have a good set of choices, I hope.
You were part of the G23. What exactly is the current position? Are you still part of that?
This is frankly a bit of a media myth, the G23. It was a letter drafted by some of our colleagues, which some of us were invited to sign. And in many cases, it was simply because during the COVID lockdown, we happened to be in Delhi, or we could go through Delhi, or some of us could go through Delhi, that we were able to sign the letter. There were not just 23, there were perhaps 100 people who would have willingly signed the letter but didn't come to Delhi during the lockdown period when the letter was finalized and issued. So it is not, and nor has it remained, as you know, a particularly coherent group with any organizational entity or any leadership or any regular meetings or anything like that. There were a group of people who met. The composition of that group shifted from time to time depending on things. And as you know, at least one or two of the signatories are no longer in the party, and one or two have dissociated themselves from it overtly and publicly. And as far as I'm concerned, I signed something because by and large I agreed with its contents. There was one sort of contradiction within the letter that I was not happy with, and I said so. But I was told, look, 7 people already signed the letter before you, so we can't change it now. You take it or leave it. And I felt that some of these things needed to be said, so I signed it. And one of the things that needed to be said was that the party was too important for the future of India to be allowed to drift, that it needed some serious revival and institutional revival within the party. That I still stand by, and I think it was an effort to strengthen the party, not to weaken it. And it was an effort to have a more effective Congress, not to undermine it. If it was misunderstood by some, then I think it's a pity, because I really think it was a sincere effort. At a time when, especially after the drubbing of 2019, a lot of people were in the doldrums. We were anxious to see us coming out of the dumps and moving forward in a positive way.
Did you meet Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi after that? Did you have any interaction?
Yes, I've met Sonia Gandhi several times after that, and Rahul Gandhi once or twice. Sonia Gandhi, as interim president, has not been inaccessible or anything. We've had meetings on work matters all the time, and yes, certainly I find her, she's certainly had health issues, we won't deny that, but she hasn't been sort of absent at the wheel. She's been very much there, working.
The concerns were raised with her also, like the concerns you had.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you probably know that in December of 2021, I think it was it 21? I'm losing track now. May have been 2020. December of 2020. There was a big meeting on the lawn of Sonia Gandhi's residence in Ten Janpath with 7 or 8 of our signatories and 8 or 9 of her close senior advisors that thrashed through all the issues in the letter. So it's not that the letter was buried. And again, as I say, there was no formal organization, but she invited those who happened to be around in Delhi at that time, and she invited some of her senior advisors, and it was a good and constructive discussion. And we feel we're all in the same party, we all have the same objective to see the Congress flourish, and it was done in that spirit.
Rahul was also part of that?
Yeah, he was there, Priyanka was there. All 3 Gandhis were there, and so were pretty much most of the senior names you can think of, Chidambaram, Kamalnath, many other senior colleagues were present, and 7 or 8 of us who had signed the letter were present.
So what exactly is the problem that is plaguing the Congress? Like, according to you, what should be done as a way forward?
Well, as you know, we had a huge Chintan Shivir in Udaipur to discuss the way forward. And one of the things we came up with was this Bharat Jodo Yatra. Though in the end, the way it's worked out, it's being an even more ambitious thing than perhaps we had conceptualized. Many of us thought of it as kind of a road yatra that would take place roughly from Gandhiji's birthday to the winter session of Parliament. What it's now turning out to be is a Pada Yatra which will take potentially 5 months, and it's a huge exercise, which will again be punctuated by state elections in November, December, and so on. So that was the ultimate decision that was made, and that's the way it's going to go. But the concept, in any case, the thinking was that we need something that will galvanize both the workers and the public, both to give attention to the issues the party is raising, and to be mobilized behind the party. That's very much the hope. We've thrown it open, though the number of designated marchers will be from the party itself. We've thrown it open to any like-minded people who wish to join. Civil society, ordinary citizens, other parties, everyone is open.
So you think that will cure all the...
No, it's just one example of a newfound determination to actually take to the streets, because as you know, one of the charges that was made is that the Congress is not just an ineffective opposition. The argument was we're not doing enough to highlight the issues on which we need to oppose the government. So going out, taking issues to the streets and doing so throughout the country is also one way of doing it. You've also seen that a number of issues, price rise in particular, we've held rallies in every state capital. So it's not that we are sticking to just noisy demonstrations in Parliament, as use somebody's phrase, attacking us. We are also trying to take the issues to the people and get people mobilized.
How do you see the prospects of Modi the next term?
No, I mean, there's no doubt that Mr. Modi is very popular, particularly in northern India and in the so-called Hindi belt. He is undoubtedly hugely popular. It was silly to pretend otherwise. You know, whether you call it a personality cult or whatever, he is larger than life, in many ways larger than his own party, but his party also is very effectively organized. It's by far the best funded party. Already in 2014, when they were in the opposition, they were better funded than most of us. By 2019, they were outspending all the candidates they were opposed to cumulatively. I mean, they came a fairly distant second in Thiruvananthapuram, but they would have, in terms of their visibility in the constituency, you could have added me and the CPI candidates and the independent candidates together in terms of posters, buntings, rallies, jeeps, platforms. I mean, the BJP would have exceeded all of that combined. But the truth is that they're well funded, they're also very well organized. I mean, I will be very honest and say that my own constituency, we've seen the RSS workers coming from all over the state. I mean, there were few constituencies that were targeted. Look at Thiruvananthapuram in 2019. Prime Minister Modi came twice. Amit Shah came 3 times. Nirmala Sitharaman and Prakash Javadekar were here repeatedly. They had literally every RSS Shakha in Kerala sending people to do door-to-door campaigning. I know Congress sympathizers who had 5 visits from BJP home squads coming and trying to persuade them to vote for the BJP candidate. This is seriously effective campaign organization. And you know, it's a miracle to be able to survive that kind of onslaught. And I'm grateful to the voters in Thiruvananthapuram for having had the faith to do that. But this is what we should be prepared for. It's a well-financed, well-organized, diligent, hard-working election machine with a leader who enjoys a personality cult. And whereas in the south we still have some immunity to some of their messaging, in the north they've turned out to be incredibly effective. I don't think that any of us expected them to do as well in UP, for example, as they did. We thought there'd be some anti-incumbency, and so, which is a typical factor in Indian elections. There wasn't. But Trinamool showed them they could be beaten.
Yeah.
So it depends on where. Bengal is not UP. And I'm hoping that that Kerala will also be able to have continue to be the last redoubt, as it were. Tamil Nadu and Kerala, I think, still have a different orientation, and all the key issues that the BJP would disagree with the other ideology on, we are the separate ones.
So they will find it tough this time also in Kerala?
I think that they are not going to find it easy to make a major impact. But to say that they will constantly be stuck at where they are depends on a lot of factors. Remember, a lot of voting decisions are made at the last minute. I would say the core support base of BJP has not grown at all. And the NDA itself, including in Kerala, has already crumbled a bit with C.K. Janu's party leaving and so on. I'm not sure about the degree of commitment of some of their other partners. So I think the core support voters, but on what issues people will be voting. In North India, for example, up to January 2019, the economy was the dominant issue and they were doing really badly on the economy. Then suddenly Pulwama happened, Balakot happened, the complete narrative changed in the north. So you can't really, a year and a half before an election, start making prognostications about who's going to do how. But I would say, as a general feature, the characteristic of our states, Kerala and Tamil Nadu, are much more resistant to the traditional BJP appeal, which is essentially the Hindutva message. Much more resistant than many of the states in the north have turned out to be.
So in Kerala, it's going to be either between LDF and UDF. The fight will be between the...
Or if other forces come up. Now, we've seen, for example, that Aam Aadmi Party has announced that they're going to start an effort in Kerala. Other parties are also looking at testing the waters here. I'm not ruling out the possibility of yet another front or yet another group coming into the state. But you know, we have to look at all the possibilities. Ultimately, what do the people want to see? And can we find a political force that can give them what they want to see? That's the key issue. Now, when it comes to a parliamentary election, there's also the question of the national government and who's realistically positioned to take on the national party there and so on. When it comes to state elections, it's a different set of issues that focus on governing here. And that's why I think 24 and 26 may be different kinds of issues in Kerala, different kinds of stories. I'm certainly paying a lot of attention to both.
What about Congress coming back to power in 2024? Like you said, you are planning to, or rather you are planning to continue in Congress for the time being anyway. And obviously Modi is more of a cult figure and hugely popular. Congress is almost disintegrating. So, and a lot of people are moving to BJP. So you think there is a possibility for Congress?
Well, I mean, those who moved to the BJP clearly had no core ideological commitment to the values of the Congress and the freedom struggle and so on. So that's a different kind of thing. But within those who have convictions that are broadly what you would call Congress convictions, in which I would number myself, there still can be a desire to do things in a different way in some areas than perhaps we're doing right now. But certainly, I think that this is a year where we're beginning to see the beginnings of an effective churn. The Bharat Jodo Yatra, the Chintan Shivir are all signs of this. And the possibility of an election for the presidency of the party, the possibility of newly invigorated effort in some of the state elections to come this year and next year, all of these remain to be seen. But again, you know, the old line about the proof of the pudding is in the eating. We will have to perform. We'll have to demonstrate that we have electoral appeal. We'll have to demonstrate that our decision making is going to give us the kinds of results that our party and its values merit.
That brings to another question. Do you think there could be a third front emerging? Because the left has always been saying for a third front, and now Mamata is there.
No, in the national level, I mean, I think that one has to give some serious thought to whether at the national level it makes sense to create a third front. For the obvious reason that the BJP has gone from 31 to 37 in 2 elections and may well be at about 40 now. If the other 60 start dividing themselves into 2, they've already lost it, pure mathematics. But also because in many cases it's not a simple syllogism, right? It's not, we don't really have equal fronts in the country. What we have is parties with strengths in specific states. So you can have a situation where you say, in this particular state, we should let this party get the bulk of the seats because they are the ones who are strong. In that state, it will be a totally different party. In this state, it will be a totally different party, and so on. And then it's a question of cumulatively adding up the numbers. For that, you need to have opposition unity as much as possible. You need cooperation amongst all parties. You need a willingness to sink egos and other clashes as much as possible. And you must be willing to sacrifice old enmities. Because sometimes, indeed, some of the regional parties have been opposed to the Congress in the past. And the Congress has been opposed to them. And we'll need to sink those differences if we really want to make an impact in 2024. I think that if we do some things right, it can still be a meaningful context. But there's no question that the BJP as a party will, by all indications, be clearly the single largest and strongest party. But anything can happen. We have to be prepared for eventualities. And if there is credible opposition unity, we could still assemble enough seats, just adding up where opposition parties are strong in different states. What happened recently in Bihar is a very interesting development that no one could have foreseen. The Bengal victory was very heartening to opposition forces. There will be other such developments, I think, in other states. I wouldn't be prepared to say we should throw in the towel and roll over and play dead, because it's far too early for that. It's also not necessary.
You're a die-hard optimist, I must say.
Yeah.
For the first time in Kerala, Congress failed to return to power after serving a term in opposition.
55 years of 55 years the government has changed.
Yes. So what went wrong last time?
That's a good question. And certainly there must have been some organizational deficiencies on our part. There must have been some messaging problems on our part. I'm not one of those who blames the selection of youthful candidates or fresh faces. But I would certainly blame our failure to name these candidates much earlier. You know, if you want to put a new face before the electorate, you don't give them 3 weeks to sell themselves, because the people have to get used to who you are, what you've done, what you're capable of doing. You have to go around, meet enough of them, make an impact. I saw in many of these youngsters' cases, I campaigned in 56 constituencies myself. I saw in many of these young cases increasing momentum in their favor. But 3 weeks was simply not long enough. So if we are going to play this game of introducing new faces, my serious advice is introduce them 3 months before, not 3 weeks. Give them time to camp in the constituency and get to be known. And then judge them if they fail. But you can't really ask people to run for 3 weeks and say, well, we couldn't sell you to the public. Not true. We may have failed to sell them, and I think of the 55, if I remember the numbers right, of the 55 new faces, only 3 won. So, I mean, obviously people will say this was obviously what went wrong. And I'd say it's not entirely fair. These people deserved a chance, and Congress should infuse new blood periodically, but we should have given them more time.
But is it that simple? Like you said, only the candidate selection, but factionalism comes as a is in Chandy, Chinnatila group, and you have been opposing that. Do you think all these factors contribute to the
factionalism has been most unfortunate, and I do believe that to some degree that's disappearing, partially out in response to the political realities you've been asking about. But yeah, I think the fact that Congress has had a reputation for being a divided force, and that, you know, a particular group may not campaign so hard for a candidate of another group and that sort of thing, that has been potentially seen as a weakness for some time. But mind you, we won elections despite that. And because usually the groups came together in time for the elections. And they had a mutual agreement on dividing the spoils and so on. They went ahead. This time around it didn't work so well. But you know, you could argue that one needs precisely a sort of internal infusion of new energy to make this work. And Mr. Sudhakaran was meant to represent also somebody whom the party workers would be stirred up by. And I would say Mr. Satishan is a very effective leader of the opposition. So we've got good things going right now, which may help us spin a different narrative in 26.
But if earlier there were only two groups, now there is another third more group and the KC Venugopal. How do you see this?
You know, Kofi Annan used to tell me, because I was very often wheeled out by the UN to go and speak for the organization. He always told me there are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. Let me not give a stupid answer.
You said you're coming back to state politics. Recently in a TV interview you said, given an opportunity, you were offered a CM ship, you would grab it.
Who wouldn't? Wouldn't you grab it? Anil, will you be CM? I'm the tooth fairy, I'm giving it to you. Of course you grab it. No, look, I mean, the fact is, if you're in a profession, everyone wants to have the most interesting challenges available in that profession. Again, the lodestar being, how do I make a difference, right? But I'm not a fool to have any illusions about how you get from there here to there. I mean, you all played snakes and ladders, so you know the many snakes on the path. And I'm not suggesting that anything is going to be easy, but the journalist was asking, as you saw the interview, there's a particular line of inquiry. I was essentially left with the choice of saying, no, I don't want it, or saying, yeah, if it's offered, I'll certainly take it up and do the best I can. But I would say that I would only take it up because there are things that need to be done. If everything was going swimmingly everywhere, I wouldn't. I would say there are things going swimmingly. I think our civic strength is amazing. I think we saw it during COVID. I really feel that we have an extremely good sense of community in our state. We've seen it during the floods again as well. People do come together, do help each other. It's a great state in that sense to be part of. You can be proud of Kerala and Keralites all the time for things like that. We saw it in the floods, we saw it how we responded in COVID. We are actually a much more efficiently organized place, whoever is in power, than most other states. All these things are good. But the deficiencies I identified earlier in our conversation need a fresh approach, a different approach. And we haven't had that approach. I tried to put some of that into our manifesto last time. Though I was not myself a candidate. If I were a candidate, I'd be even more evangelical about some of these ideas.
You share an excellent rapport with O.C. Chetan, as you call him.
I do.
And, yeah, I know that. And every time when O.C. Chetan, as you say, hear your name, his face lights up like anything.
I'm glad to hear that. That's nice to know.
So, what is that rapport which you both share?
No, I have an enormous amount of respect for him. I mean, he's this classic Janagian politician. I couldn't be like him if I tried. So I admire people who do things in a way that in some ways I think are exemplary. Of his kind, he is the paragon. I mean, it's no accident he's been elected for 50 years from one place because the people love him. But it's not just the people of his constituency. Anywhere in Kerala, he's mobbed. I mean, I've been with him in so many locations, on so many stages, on so many issues. This is a man who has his finger on the pulse of the people chronically. I mean, and there are so many jokes about him which are probably, exaggerated, apocryphal about, how he once received a petition on the toilet. He was sitting in the toilet, somebody came to the bathroom, and he still took it instead of giving the fellow a whack and saying, go away, as would have happened in some other parts of India. He is a true man of the people. It can be maddening sometimes. You'll go to see the CM on a serious issue and the man is surrounded by a mob. These are part of the working style issues of OC, but no one, I think, of any party can claim to have a greater rapport with the people of Kerala than Oommen Chandy.
You also have a very good rapport with the CM. I mean, you may be one of the few Congress leaders who shares that kind of personal connect with the CM. I mean, why? What are the reasons?
No, I mean, look, I hope I share a good rapport with almost everybody because I'm the kind of person who shows respect when respect is deserved, and I speak straight, and I don't go around bad-mouthing people or attacking them behind their back or any of that stuff. It's just not my nature. So I think that, there would be a good reason, somebody would have to have a really good reason to turn sort of hostile towards me, because I would give them no cause for hostility. I'm not, I'm not somebody who goes around trying to encroach in anyone's space. From childhood, I've been born without an envy gene. I've essentially assumed that there is enough in the world for everyone to succeed. I've never wished anyone ill. As a writer, I've given glowing reviews to young writers coming up who have since eclipsed me. I've launched books of writers who have sold far more copies than I have there subsequently. But they came to me for a start and I was happy to do. That's the way I am. I think let everyone succeed. There is plenty. I don't believe in the sort of lobster mentality that some have. So as a result, because I don't bear anyone any ill will, unless they see themselves in some sort of hostile competition with me, they have no reason to dislike me, I hope. But I mean, of course I know that I'm disliked by many, but I'm just saying that I have given them no cause for it. But I do respect Pinarayi Vijayan. I think he's a very efficient and serious person. And I have found in all the issues that I've dealt with him, he's a no-nonsense person. He knows the issues he's talking about, or he listens patiently if he doesn't know. And you can rely. If he gives you his word, it's done. If a particular problem must be attended to, he'll give it the focus it deserves. He's a very professional person. In fact, in many ways, he is unusual for an Indian politician in that he is so professional in his attitude to work. I'm sure that he has his ideology and so on, not in his party. I don't see all of that. But I see him as a chief minister, and I go to him as an MP, and I have this issue, that issue, whatever. I found him very, very straightforwardly accessible. And to discuss issues with, which I've done repeatedly, national issues, international issues, whatever, going back these, now, how long has he been CM? 7 years, but I've also met him earlier when he was party leader, but much more frequently as CM. I found him very easy to talk to. I'm not saying that we agree with everything he stands for or embodies, but I just, that's, you know, I see the best in people and I work with them as best I can. Frankly, maybe Kerala could use some more of that in our politics, but that's...
You have taken too much of time.
Yes. And he's, at 9:10, I had an 8 o'clock dinner. So.
I have one more question, one more.
But will you use all of this?
Yeah. You know, Kerala is one of
He will take 6 pages of the Indian Express.
Kerala is one of the most political of all states, like very political. But when you talk about parties like AAP, you know, it's more of an apolitical party. It's considered as more of an apolitical party. Do you think these kind of parties have a space in Kerala's current political scene?
It's a real challenge that AAP will have to find out, because the honest truth is that they don't want to get into the Hindu-Muslim space, for example. They have this attitude that if they're in that area, then they will be beaten to death by the BJP and so on ideologically. So they focus completely on service delivery and only that. But in a state where 47% of our population is minorities, is that going to be good enough? Will not any party trying to get elected in Kerala have to take a stand on issues that the AAP has so far refused to take a stand on? And if they refuse to take the stand in Kerala, will that be acceptable to the voters? It remains to be seen. Maybe voters will see a merit in a different approach this time, but I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks a lot.